Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. There we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right of the week, and we're talking Eagles-Giants again as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 284. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with my friend Ben Fennell about the Eagles' Week 10 matchup against those New York Giants on Sunday afternoon. Ben is a big part of the production of Eagles Game Plan, and with that in mind, we'll talk about what went into making this week's show coming out of the bye week, the keys to victory for the Eagles, some big matchups, some numbers that you need to know going into the game. We'll hit on all of it in Chalk Talk. After that, Ben and I will go through our scouting report segment, and this week we're going to focus in on one of the more dynamic players at his position, one of the most enigmatic players on this team, and that's tight end Evan Ingram. What does he bring to the table? How can he impact this game and the value of the tight ends that are especially built like Evan Ingram? So we'll cover all of that in our scouting report, and then that's not it, though, because at the end of the show, I caught up with Eagles defensive back Avonte Maddox to talk about his athletic background and coming on to play multiple positions throughout the course of his young career already here in Philadelphia. Before we get to that, though, a couple of quick things I want to make sure we hit on. As a quick reminder, the best way to throw us your support is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating and leave us a comment. If you have a question on there, we will get to it right here on the show. I love everybody that has already gone on and thrown us your support. It's the best way for people that are just trying to find Eagles podcasts. If you go on and leave ratings and leave comments, leave questions, it boosts up the list there on Apple Podcasts, makes it more visible to everybody else that's looking for that kind of content. All right. Let's get into it now. I told you we were going to talk with Ben Fennell at the top. It's time now for Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, back again here for Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, my friend Ben Fennell. Ben, look, the big focus here this week, obviously the Eagles' first rematch of the 2020 season. They played the Giants last in Week 7. Now they see them again in Week 10, just 3 weeks later, 2 games removed. I think when you look at this game, at this show, it was interesting because usually if the two teams play each other, these division rivals, we've got time to kind of space that out. Hey, Washington, they play them in Week 1. They don't see them again until, Week 13, Week 14. Dallas, they play them in Week 6. They don't play them again until Week 16, Week 17. This year, not as much the case. So, with this one, it was a little bit of a challenge to try and how do we make these shows a little bit different. We don't want to hit the viewers with the same topics, that we did just 2 weeks ago. So I think looking at it from a Giants defensive standpoint, it was cool because they are playing better defensively. So we were able to focus on some good things. I thought the segment that we did with Logan Ryan's game-winning interception, game-sealing interception this past week against Washington was a really fun play to break down, and Greg Cosell did a great job of breaking it down. And then offensively, their run game has kind of come alive a little bit. It's not an explosive run game, but it's been the tone setter for that offense. So that was really kind of the focus there, just kind of looking at the way that this team has kind of evolved just over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it seems like a long bye week too, almost like a real divide in the season where it felt like that was a 3-week bye week there. And we played the Giants 2 months ago, but it was really 2 weeks ago.
I think a lot of that though is because of everything that's going on in the country that says oh yeah, that feels like it was 6 months ago.
It's been an exhausting 10 days and for more reasons than one, obviously,
exactly.
As we know what our country's going through and politics and X, Y, and Z. But yeah, the Giants are an interesting team, and it's going to be a different team from 2 weeks ago. It's such a constantly evolving NFL with the injuries and COVID. It's such a week-to-week, day-to-day league right now. But they're defensively, they're playing pretty good ball, and they're preventing big plays, and they're getting turnovers and playing a lot of good man coverage. And then on the offensive side, not turning the ball over and running the ball and just playing safer as you're getting into November and December. And Daniel Jones is starting to play a little bit more polished. And you saw the 3 turnovers last week against the Washington football team. But again, 0 turnover differential. They're second in the league with takeaways, but the differential is 0. The offense has to help them out. So I think they're getting good enough play on the defensive side of the ball week to week to win. Like we saw it on Monday night against the Buccaneers. I feel like that was kind of a national coming out party that yeah, this is a competitive team. And, when they start, the game on the right foot, they can give anybody, whether it's Tampa Bay or whoever it is in the league, a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, this is a team that they're playing hard. And I think that's a credit to that coaching staff. I want to hit you real quick because one of the things we always try and do is take a little bit of a deep dive into an aspect of the game, of the matchup from a schematic standpoint. And I mentioned their run game has really come alive, and we've talked on the show in the past about the differences between gap schemes and zone schemes. And this Giants offense, they rely more so on those gap schemes. And one run in particular has been their counter run play. It's you get the front side double team. So you get the right guard, right tackle, or left guard, left tackle. Those guys getting a double team on the 3 technique. You're pulling a backside guard, and you're coming back across the formation as well with a tight end to the play side. And that tight end very often has been Caden Smith, and he's done a really good job in that role as a point of attack player. And I think when you look at a lot of those runs, a lot of them have come from both 12 and 13 personnel, and they will play a decent amount of 12 and 13. So that's what I wanted to ask you. The troubles of defending 12 and 13 personnel when you've got multiple tight ends on the field. And I'll let you kind of handle it from the pass game standpoint. What are the issues that kind of face a defense if you're Jim Schwartz through the Eagles defense and you're looking at Evan Ingram, Caden Smith, Levine Toilolo, those 3 tight ends, and how they're used in this offense?
Well, the Giants, personnel-wise, obviously are putting defenses in conflict. Caden Smith's a good blocking tight end out of Stanford. They'll even work in some two-back stuff with Elijah Penny, who's very much a through-and-through traditional fullback, which just gives the defense more to consider, a little bit more in the run game. But in the pass game, the multiple tight ends, because you have Caden Smith, Levine Toilolo, we know they're kind of extra tackles, but then they work in Evan Ingram in there, and he's kind of that X factor in the tight end group. So how they deploy those tight ends and where they are in the formation, you have to pretty much declare when they walk off the sideline. So when you see those 3 tight ends, Jim Schwartz is going to counter with heavier personnel, but then all of a sudden they might isolate, Evan Ingram out wide where he's really like a oversized receiver. And then what do? Do we walk out a TJ Edwards or a Nate Gary, and you get to put in some defensive binds and conflicts with your personnel based on formation? And when you have versatile players like Evan Ingram, that is a tight end on paper, and you want a defense to respond with larger personnel, then all of a sudden you might have a matchup to take advantage of. Or maybe the defense stays small and nickel or big nickel, and then you find a blocking advantage for Caden Smith, up against a safety or a smaller linebacker. So I think the multiple tight end, cat and mouse of offensive and defensive coordinators is one of the more interesting ththings in the NFL over the last 5-6 years.
And then if you speak purely to a run game standpoint, which you talked about, like even just the individual matchup of like a bigger tight end up against a safety or a nickel corner. The other part of that is the assignment part of that, where you're looking at it from a run fit standpoint. I think when you look, especially at 13 personnel, if you've got all 3 of those tight ends up on the line of scrimmage, that does put some stress on you as a defense because you've got now a bunch of extra gaps that must be accounted for in the run game. And then even as well, using those tight ends as a wing and then inserting them into the formation. And they ran a couple of those plays against the Eagles back in week 7 where, Caden Smith would line up as a wing, we'll say on the right side, and then would go as a lead blocker up into the middle of the formation. That really messes with a linebacker, with a safety in terms of his run fits and his gap responsibilities. And honestly, with a lot of teams not necessarily running that all the time in the NFL, if you don't see it that often, if you've got young guys, inexperienced guys, that's a lot to rep. It's a lot to kind of process, and it can be hard to do. And that's why, if you see teams that kind of change things up and go that direction, it can be a little bit of a mental burden on you going into the week.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the counter run scheme, which we saw a lot of the Giants over the last 2 weeks against Washington, against Dallas, against us 3 weeks ago. And just for the fans at home, a very simple explanation. It's traditionally a weak side misdirection run. Yep. And I love it for 2 reasons. Number one, the weak side aspect, you try to get a defense to align to the strength, and then you run to the weak side. The other thing is the counter aspect of it. So the running back's going to take a misdirection counter step, hopefully getting the defense to then influence with that counter step. to then go the other direction. So I like some of the built-in, schematic advantages, trying to get them misalign, and then getting them to misinfluence with some of the action, and then bringing some of those backside those backside blockers, typically a backside guard, typically a backside wing or a fullback, and getting numbers advantage on the play side again. It's still a power run, so you're getting vertical displacement. I really like it, and I think it's kind of a good slashing scheme for quick-footed backs, those guys that can put their foot in the ground like a zone scheme back. That counter run, typically one-step misdirection, foot in the ground, and back downhill. So it has a similar kind of tendency of those one-cut running backs.
And what I like, too, is with those kind of gap schemes, it is relatively well-defined for the back. It's not like a zone scheme where you've got to kind of pick your way and you've got 4 different potential entry points into the line of scrimmage. You've got, hey, I'm following this block, or if not, I'm going out the back door, or I'm going to bounce this outside. Like, it's really a well-defined kind of scheme. And when you've got kind of these high cut runners, you look at Wayne Gallman. He's not a guy that is he doesn't have the feet to necessarily like, all right, I'm going to sift through the garbage here, sift through the briar patch and pick my way through. Instead, hey, look, you're going B gap on this play. You're going C gap on this play. If it's not there, bounce it outside or cut it back. But it's a very well-defined kind of system. And I think when you look at this counter play, it's been a very effective tool for them going over the last couple of weeks for sure.
I like that you know where it's hitting, but you can't just hit it like a trap run.
Right.
It's all about the timing and the patience. And I think fans have a really good visual of Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers.
Right.
Just slow dancing behind the line of scrimmage, waiting for the blocks to develop. And then he hits it when that kind of those C's part. So you know where it's hitting, but it's not necessarily a through and through 100-mile-an-hour downhill trap run. You have to have a little bit of nuance and patience for those backside blocks to develop over to the play side.
So just for fans, again, the Eagles will be repping this play in practice, and it will be a big play that Alex Singleton, TJ Edwards, the rest of that linebacking core, Duke Riley, they will have seen a lot in practice this week. They've seen it on tape a lot. They have to be ready for it. It was a mostly like inside zone and duo kind of game for the Giants the last time the Eagles played, and we saw some misdirection stuff with jet sweeps and things of that nature. But I think ultimately the counter run has been such a bread and butter play for the last 2 weeks. I would be surprised if they did not see it in this game. And again, just from a run fit standpoint, they've got to be prepared for it. So that's the big thing there from the matchup. Was there something that you felt like we didn't hit on this week's show that you would have liked to see if we could have squeezed into the rundown?
Just the Giants' propensity on defense to take the ball away.
Yeah.
And when you look at the most takeaways in the league, number 1, Buccaneers. Number 2, the Giants. Number 3, the Steelers. Like one of those teams just kind of stands out there in the rankings. Bucs and Steelers, some of the most competitive teams in the league. Giants, not so much, but 3 interceptions last week off Alex Smith. But the differential, like I had mentioned a couple minutes ago, is still at 0. So until we're getting complementative play, we need the offense to protect the ball a little bit more. We may see those turnovers yield better results. So it was just something that I saw. It was just a little surprise to say, whoa, they're taking the ball away a lot. Why are they still here in the differential? They're not getting the complementative play from both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think to me, like the other guy, like we didn't mention Darius Slayton's name once in the entire show. And he was a big focus the last time. And I thought that Darius Slay did a great job in that matchup. I think he had a couple catches, but nothing obviously backbreaking. I think when you look at Darius Slayton, he is the true game breaker down the field. Evan Ingram hadn't really been used that way up until the last couple of weeks. They're starting to, feature some more vertical route concepts with him, getting, using that athleticism, using that 4.4 speed down the field. But I think really, Darius Slayton is the guy that we didn't necessarily talk about this week that we kind of left him on the cutting room floor.
And one other guy in that receiver room that we saw a little bit more over the past couple of weeks, Austin Mack out of Ohio State. Really interesting, well-rounded receiver. Good height, good weight, good speed, good hands, can win all over the field. I don't know what he does well, but he's just a really good, well-rounded receiver. And if you go and see, was he number 81 out there? And you may think in a 3-receiver set, who's 81? Don't sleep on this kid because he can maybe go 3 for 90 and a touchdown on you and be that third option after Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton.
Yeah, no question. I think that's certainly a big one. Is there a one-on-one matchup that you're most excited for in this game?
Yeah, it's going to be one we didn't see. So one changing position of the Giants offensive line, Will Hernandez, now out with COVID. That means rookie left guard Shane Lemieux out of Oregon is going to step in there. He had played a little bit of fullback and swing tackle early in the season. Very athletic player, quick off the ball, not really a mauler, not really a people mover. He's going to struggle in pass protection against some bigger bodies. Who could that be? Maybe Malik Jackson there at 3-tech, maybe putting Fletch over on the right side for a couple of reps against him. Yep. That is not a good matchup for Shane Lemieux. Love his quickness off the ball, good run blocker, experienced player coming out of Oregon, decent size. But if he's one-on-one pass row against a Malik Jackson of the world, that's an advantage the Eagles have to take, really capitalize off.
One thing we talked about late this week, or earlier this week, rather, with Greg Cosell here on the podcast was, this is a team in the Eagles that they're getting healthy, right? I talked about it last week on Eagles game plan as well. You got Dallas Goedert, Jalen Reagor, Jason Peters returning to the lineup against Dallas in week 9. This week, there are reports Isaac Seumalo, his practice window is activated. Miles Sanders potentially on the way back. Alshon Jeffrey potentially on the way back. You're starting to see.
It was tough to get any more injured. There was only room to go up kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. I mean, knock on wood. We don't want to try and jinx that. But I think when you look at, this offense, getting healthy and all these pieces coming back in. So the matchup that I'm most interested in is going to be Dallas Goedert, the tight end, matched up on Jabril Peppers, because Peppers has been their primary tight end matchup guy, especially when they're in their sub package. But that's a one-on-one that I'm most excited to see. Remember, Peppers gave up that game-winning touchdown against Boston Scott back in week 7 on a vertical route. Goddard he only had one catch on one target. He was targeted another time, but there was a penalty that brought the play back. I think when you look at Goddard, now a full week and change now with the bye week removed from coming back from that injury, I would expect that he'll be a bigger part of this offense. And with Zach Ertz still sidelined, I think that he could be a huge, huge part of this game plan.
Fran, before we really put this matchup to bed, where do you kind of see the future of this Giants football team? You look at some of these players they have on IR with Nate Solder, Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney. They spent really high draft capital, nice player out of Alabama that we think will be a fixture of that defense for hopefully 8 to 10 years. Is this team trending in the right direction, or are they still kind of idling in this rebuild mode? I just saw a projection of the top 10 draft picks. I think 3 of the top 5 were in the NFC East. Some people are thinking, do they hit reset on quarterback already? I see a team that's really trending up. And I see a lot of the issues kind of in the mirror with them, like we had mentioned on the offense and turning the ball over. I think they're kind of putting together the right pieces, figuring out what they have, figuring out who's a cornerstone. But I see this team kind of moving from being a bottom-dwelling unit to kind of the middle of the pack. And I think that's what you want with a young, kind of developing roster.
Yeah, and I said the quote with Greg earlier this week, too. I mean, Jason Garrett said, I think it was in week 5, week 6, it was not like very early in the season, but he was like, we're still trying to figure out what we're good at offensively. Like they were still trying to kind of find their way. Obviously, you lose your best player. You lose Saquon Barkley back in week 1 or week 2. And I think when you look at that loss, they really had to kind of reshape the way that they looked at that offense. They're not getting great play out of Daniel Jones. That, to me, is the big question they have to answer over the next 8 weeks, right? For them going into the offseason, is Daniel Jones the answer at quarterback? You don't want that to be up in the air, because if you do end up with a top 8 pick, a top 7 pick, we talk about this every single week on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. You look at, obviously, you're probably out of the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, but you look at Justin Fields, you look at Zach Wilson out of BYU, you look at Trey Lance out of North Dakota State, you could be in play for one of those 3 players. And if you don't feel like Daniel Jones is the answer, well, the new coaching staff might say, yeah, let's go with one of these 3 guys. There are other quarterbacks that could be on the market as well. Who knows what happens with Dak Prescott? Maybe he wants to go up to New York. I think that could be really interesting. So I think ultimately they have to realize what Daniel Jones is. Outside of that question, I think defensively you're starting to really see an identity, and that group is playing really hard. Offensively, they're playing really hard. They're a competitive, tough football team. So I think, the arrow is certainly pointing up. You got to give a lot of credit to Joe Judge and Patrick Graham, that coaching staff, for trying to get the most out of what they've got, because some of these high picks haven't necessarily worked out over the last few years, but they're really getting a lot out of the players that they've got right now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Just kind of looking at the roster, I'm like, I like a lot of the pieces. They get some of these guys healthy. Shane Zamini's back, Lorenzo Carter. They need a twitchy quarterback killer off the edge.
They need that guy, yes.
They're really struggling with that. You look at who's leading the team in pressures right now: Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, B.J. Hill. It's really not the formula you want. B.J. Hill is a nice player, so is Leonard Williams. But, I just think they're in a good position next draft to kind of see where the board falls to them and just get better at, wherever they can.
But that's what's crazy is that despite the fact they don't have that guy, and despite the fact that, no O'Shane Ximines was a third-round pick, Lorenzo Carter got hurt a couple of weeks ago as well, so he's on injury reserve. I mean, they're still 8th in sacks. They're 6th. They've got 6 third down sacks. They're 10th in sack percentage. They're middle of the pack when it comes to pressures and pressure rate. I mean, they're doing a nice job. They just don't have that one guy. But then I think back to these New England teams, where these guys come from. They don't necessarily. That's not necessarily the school that they've come from either. That's why I'll be interested to see how they try and address that if they prioritize that necessarily going into the draft or into the offseason, if that's an area of priority for them. But I'll tell you what, they've got a lot of young pieces, and again, they're playing really hard. So I'll certainly give them a lot of credit at this point. Let's now transition to the next part of this discussion, and that's your favorite stats of the week. Is there a number or two that you feel is really important, really pivotal for this matchup?
Yeah, I like Daniel Jones. I think he's getting better. Right now, he's 4th in the NFL in third down completion percentage. 4th in the NFL, completion percentage on third down. What is that telling me? He's getting the ball out of his hands, taking what the defense gives, which is great for a young quarterback. But Fran, what happened last time we played the Giants? Third down, pressure look, got the ball out of his hands. What's been plaguing the Giants? Drops. Leading the NFL with 21 drops, 7% of passes have been dropped. So Daniel Jones is doing the right thing, getting the ball out, just like that third down play where Evan Ingram, ball right in the chest, got the ball out with a pressure look, popped right up, interception. That was the perfect snapshot of what's going on with the Giants. Daniel Jones is playing better, more decisive, accurate, getting the ball out. He needs help. And guys like Evan Ingram have to step up and help this kid. So I like that he's completing passes on third down. The drops are killing this team.
Yeah, that's what I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier is they have to figure that out over the next 8 weeks. Is it Daniel Jones or is it everybody else around him? Can they get him more weapons? Can they just kind of, make themselves a little bit of a more consistent offense? And, you look at some of the numbers. I mean, the pressure rates that speaks for itself, right? I mean, they're last in the league in pressures allowed. They're 31st in the league in pressure rate. They're 31st in sacks allowed. They're sacked 8 times on third down so far this season. They have not been explosive a lot of the time because he does not have the time. So I think it's a really kind of an interesting discussion that they're going to have in that building. Let's get to the next part. I just kind of empty the notebook here. Anything else from around the league that you have found interesting just doing your film study?
Yeah, a couple fun things. Josh Allen, a huge win last week against the Seattle Seahawks. They're sitting there at 7-2 atop the AFC East, leading the NFL in play action touchdowns, yards, attempts, dropbacks, completions. Really like the run action and then taking the shot plays off of run action there, throwing the ball down the field to Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Really fun team, Buffalo Bills. Downfield receptions. We have a 3-way tie at the top of the league. Justin Jefferson, rookie at LSU, CeeDee Lamb, rookie at Oklahoma, and DK Metcalf, second-year player at Ole Miss. Interesting body types right there. You have a huge 230-pound tank, and then CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, kind of wiry slot receivers, all winning down the field in different ways. Pass rushing, most sacks from the left side, Emmanuel Ogbah with 8. Most sacks from the right side, Trey Hendrickson with 8. Not the most household names you would expect to hear there, but 2 guys playing really good ball. Emmanuel Ogbah, Miami Dolphins. I'm not even sure if fans would know where he is right now. Trey Hendrickson over there at New Orleans Saints playing really good ball, blowing the doors off of the Bucs last week. And then the best QB right now, under pressure. The best QB throwing under pressure. Rookie Justin Herbert, over 100 QB rating, 101.6 throwing under pressure. This guy is tough. He's gritty. He has the great mental makeup that he's going to hang in the pocket, not only make throws under pressure, but extend the play, fight to live another down, make plays with his legs and his arms in combination. It's a really fun team. And you have to remember, we had Phillip Rivers in that pocket for the last 15 years. I think he broke the pocket twice in his career. He was getting that ball out in timing and rhythm. It's really fun to watch Keenan Allen have some second reaction ability. We know he can get open. Watch him get open in the scramble drill now. It's really fun to watch these guys and the confidence in the receiving core knowing this quarterback's going to extend the play. He's going to hold on. We got to keep playing and get open. This LA Chargers team is really well built. I'm excited for them in the future.
That's a really good point. He's certainly a really fun player. All these young quarterbacks say it's great for the league, and it's just a lot of fun to watch these guys continue to kind of learn on the job and make big plays on a weekly basis. All right, man, let's get into our last segment here that you and I are going to do. It's time for our scouting report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, Ben, so let's talk this week about Giants tight end Evan Ingram. And this guy, look, he was a really intriguing player coming out of Ole Miss, right? I mean, 6'3", 234, blew the doors off the combine, a truly dynamic presence at the position with every definition of the word. I mean, he ran sub 4.4. He wasn't extremely productive. At times I felt like he was a little bit underused, but 42 starts in his career in college, 162 catches, just was a dynamic presence in all areas of the field from the tight end position. Ended up being a first-round pick. I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts on him because obviously, look, he has not quite lived up to that first-round mantle. I know the durability has been a little bit of a concern. He's had issues with drops as well, especially this year. Has not been able to consistently stay healthy, like I said. Let's kind of reflect back on Evan Ingram coming out of college and then the value of that kind of player in today's NFL.
Yeah, he was an interesting athletic player at Ole Miss, 6'3", 235, ran that 4.42 at the combine with some really explosive broad and vertical jumps that kind of turned some heads, and he really separated himself with the other tight ends in the class, showing he has an explosive element to his game. My final projection, I thought he'd be a nice kind of H-back, move tight end, chess piece in the pass game. I like his advantage against some bigger linebackers and safeties and maybe even some slot corners, the way, Trey Burton made so many big plays for us in this Eagles offense in that Super Bowl season, 2017. But some of the pros I had written down from his Ole Miss tape: fluid, athletic tight end, diverse route tree, really good short area burst and snap in and out of his breaks. Yep. He could high point balls with leaping ability. He could track the ball down the field. Really good vertical threat. Outside the numbers, middle of the field, can climb on off coverage. Really good down the field. I think he had 10 receptions and 3 touchdowns in one of his seasons at Ole Miss. But some of the issues, I didn't like the way he used his frame to box out defenders at the catch point. Tons of concentration drops. And that was something we've seen again in his career with the Giants and some of the most recent tape we watched with the Giants. I feel like the last game me and you watched, Fran, couple brutal drops in the Eagles game last matchup. So that's something that's kind of was a trait of his at Ole Miss that bled into the NFL. I don't love his run blocking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like everything you just said really kind of I had a lot of the same things in my report. From a run blocking standpoint, I know that you saw a lot of concerns as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of technique issue stuff. Lowers his head on contact, bit of a hugger with his hands, cut attempts. He's just diving at the floor. Minimal pass pro attempts. I think he had 5 pressures on 70 attempts, which is a terrible rate. But collectively, you love his upside in the pass game, and you really see kind of an Aaron Hernandez role with the New England Patriots that first year when they drafted him and Gronk in the same draft, and it was a lot of 2 tight end sets, and Gronk did the dirty work as the Y tight end. Aaron Hernandez was that U tight end, that second tight end, a move tight end that's going to get a little bit more down the field opportunities, more double moves and things like that. And I think that's what Evan Ingram's really carved out his role with the Giants. But his consistency has really hurt them. And a lot of the things we're noting in his Ole Miss tape have shown up with the Giants.
So here, let me ask you this question, because throughout his career in both coaching staffs that he's been under, they've really kind of said all right, he's not going to be a true 3-down, run pass option for us, right? He was always been paired, with another tight end or 2 tight ends to say all right, these guys are going to help us in the run game. He's going to be a pass catcher for us. And so they've had to play a lot of 12, a lot of 13 personnel. Now it's Caden Smith. I know that they've worked in a lot of guys over the last couple of years. Rhett Ellison was a big player for them over the last couple of years, and he's always had to be paired with one of those other guys. So let me ask you this. When you look at a player like that with that skill set, in your mind, if that's what his ceiling is, if that's what he becomes, is he worthy is that worthy of a first round pick? If you're saying like coming out of Ole Miss, this is what he's going to be, and he's not going to be more than that. Would you still take that player in the first round? Even if let's just take the drops out and say that, he could be a dynamic pass catcher, but you're going to have to play a lot of 12 personnel. You're going to have to adopt this style just because he's not going to be what you want in the run game.
Well, it's really interesting to think about because you look at the tight ends in the first round there. O.J. Howard, which you thought was going to be an elite two-way tight end with that ability to block on early downs and the athletic upside in the pass game with that huge frame. Then Evan Ingram and then David Njoku, who's more of an Evan Ingram upside in the pass game type. So positional value and what they're being asked to do and what you can provide is going to be really interesting because if you look at Evan Ingram and say he's just a matchup guy in the pass game, take an explosive receiver there that's maybe a little bit more, ready to play and more of a plug and play piece for your offense. But having this kind of move tight end here that isn't an elite pass catcher, isn't an elite explosive athlete, isn't an elite, guy in the pass game, really nice player. But I think what you're asking, Fran, is the conversation of draft capital versus the quality of player and the skill set of the player. And if it is just a one-dimensional move tight end, is just warrant a first-round pick. We've seen a lot of these types, whether it's the Tyler Eiferts or the Zach Ertzes of the world, really fall to more of the day two kind of ballpark for them. So looking back on Njoku and looking back on Evan Ingram, you think the Browns and the Giants are okay with the draft capital and value they've allocated?
I guess that's the question. And you look at Denver, right? Denver, they just selected Noah Fant. What was it, last year, 2019, in the first round. I kind of saw Fant as a similar kind of player. He came from a pro-style offense where he was asked at times to put his hand in the dirt and block defensive ends, block linebackers, and men on the line of scrimmage. But that wasn't necessarily his bag. That wasn't necessarily his game. And that's what I find interesting is that you look at Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has never been a dominant blocker, but he's been enough of a blocker that if you play 11 personnel, it's not a telltale sign for the defense that, they're going to throw the ball. So he's not a true one-way guy. And that's why on the other hand, I look at him like, all right, well, if I can only have a one-way player that's a dynamic pass catcher and not a good blocker versus a guy that is a great blocker and just a zero as a pass catcher, the former, the pass catcher is the harder one to find and therefore has a little bit more value, right? So I kind of go back and forth on it and say like, all right, well, is it an ideal situation in round one, top 20 picks to take a guy who's not really a 3-down player, not a truly versatile weapon because of the questions he's got in the run game? You made the comparison to Aaron Hernandez. I think when Aaron Hernandez was at his peak in New England, right? Everybody, I think anybody in the media, any fan would say, yeah, he's a home run first round pick. But one of the reasons Hernandez was so great was that they played 12 personnel and they played the matchups. They were doing it before anybody else in the league was really doing it. Everybody kind of went that direction more so afterwards. But the way that they were able to play, that allowed Hernandez to be the player that he was. I think it's a really, really interesting discussion when you talk about using a player like that and a scheme. If he's used in the right situation, this guy could be dynamic. He could be a great, great player. If not, now I think you're going to have questions about, okay, well, what can this guy really be for us?
Well, I think the case studies inside that 2017 draft are worth looking at. Yeah. You look at Gerald Everett with the Rams in round 2. Very similar type of usage and player to Evan Ingram. Jonnu Smith, 3rd-round pick to the Tennessee Titans. Similar type of usage and player to Evan Ingram. So can you have gotten that same type of value and production on maybe day 2? As opposed to that first-round pick? Yep. I think these are some of the lessons you have to learn and say, what did we like so much about Evan Ingram? What didn't he provide for us so far? Where could we have gotten that elsewhere? What didn't we like about Jonnu Smith to take him in round 1? What did we like so much about Evan Ingram to say, you know what, we could probably just take him in on day 2? So there was something different in there that separated all those guys on their board. So I think looking back and reflecting and having those post-mortems on your draft class are important to kind of learn and project moving forward.
Let me ask you this question. Does the value of a player like Ingram change depending on who that other tight end is opposite him? If you're going to say, okay, we're going to take Ingram, we're going to play a lot of 12 personnel, does it change the math? Does it change the equation if that other tight end is for Rob Gronkowski versus Nick Boyle or Jack Doyle or Vance McDonald, right? I feel like that says, all right, man, like now both these guys can be really dynamic pass catchers. Now we really have to make sure that we're geared up here. Oh, yeah, and by the way, they could still run the ball out of these sets. I feel like that even kind of changes the value. Ingram becomes a little bit more dynamic.
Well, Fran, talk about it with our own backyard. Talk about what was it with Zach Ertz early in his career? Who did he have? Who was the Y tight end with the Philadelphia Eagles when Zach Ertz joined the Eagles?
Yeah, it was Brent. I mean, you had Brent Selleck here, kind of at the peak of his career.
No question. So what was the pressure on Zach Ertz as a young player? I don't have to be the Y tight end here. I'm the move tight end. I could survive with some of these move assignments and backside cuts and stuff. Brent's going to do the dirty work. Brent's going to teach me. I'm going to learn. That wasn't the situation Evan Ingram walked into. Yep. They drafted Evan Ingram in the same offseason. They went out and spent money on Red Ellison from the Vikings to go get a blocking tight end after you just spent first-round draft capital on a tight end. It's also important to look at the fourth round and fifth rounds. And, yeah, there's George Kittles in this draft as well.
Yeah.
So, and they thought there was another kind of a late round O.J. Howard and Jeremy Sprinkle to the Washington football team in the fifth round. So really interesting kind of draft and profiles of this tight end group.
And again, that's not to slam Evan Ingram, because Ingram, again, is one of the most dynamic players at the position in this draft or in this. But
it's a reflection on where you were taken. No question.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, I think going into this game, Evan Ingram is a player, and we talk about him on the show, on Eagles Game Plan this week. He is the guy that you've got to be able to stop. They funneled the offense through him right now in the passing game. I mean, he's by far and away has got the most targets in this offense, especially over the last month. That he has really taken a jump in terms of being a focal point for this pass game. He's going to have his drops, but he also has the great plays as well. He had that diving touchdown this past week down the seam against Washington in the red zone, where you're going to see him make those kinds of plays. You've got to account for it as a defense. I just think the tight end position is just such a fun one to discuss. You and I did our deep dive on it a couple of weeks ago on the Journey to the Draft podcast, where we went under the hood and talked about all the traits we like and the value and things like that. But fun to kind of continue it here with this kind of pro example.
Even the undrafteds in that year are fun. I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones, undrafted, really interesting athletic matchup. Who's carved out a nice career? Dan Arnold.
Yeah. To
the New Orleans Saints out of Wisconsin, Platteville.
Two college receivers right there.
Yeah, no question. So, it's really interesting just to kind of look at, who was taken, where they were taken, and where they've since taken their careers in the short 4 years.
It's a fun discussion to have. Well, Ben, thanks so much once again for joining us here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. We'll talk to you this week here on the Journey to the Draft.
Raise a glass to that comforting feeling of an Eagles touchdown with the all-new Broad & Pattison wine collection created in partnership with Wink. Featuring a Cabernet, a Rosé, and a Chardonnay. Broad & Pattison wines are the perfect pairing for any occasion. Now you can bring the sweet taste of victory with you to a dinner with friends or to the tailgate with your game day crew. Purchase online today at PhiladelphiaEagles.com/wine to stock up and have Broad & Pattison delivered right to your door. A portion of proceeds from every bottle benefit Eagles Autism Foundation.
Experience the fastest internet and more in a snap. With Xfinity XFi, you get the speed, the coverage, the control, and security you need for the ultimate in-home Wi-Fi experience. Xfinity, proud partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Don't miss your chance to be in the stands at Lincoln Financial Field this season with an Eagles fan cutout. Put on your game day best and upload a photo of yourself so that you can still join us on game days. Fan cutouts printed by Rico are only $100 with net proceeds benefiting Eagles Autism Foundation. Your purchase will also waive the registration fee for the 2021 Eagles Autism Challenge event. Order yours at PhiladelphiaEagles.com/cutouts.
Great stuff from Ben, who you could follow on Twitter, just like I do, at Ben Fennell NFL. And while you're at it, I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And I greatly appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That's one way to support the show. But the other way is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, and even leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out today to a couple people who did exactly that. M. Cruzito left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts saying, listening from Texas, avid listener, loyal Eagles fan, love the show, and appreciate us not holding back when there's some criticism for the team and the coaches when needed. Appreciate that, Crisito. And then Cooper Dog 51 left a 5-star review saying, love the film breakdowns, love the show. Thanks to both of you. Really appreciate that, M. Crisito and Cooper Dog 51. All right, to wrap up this show, I told you I caught up with Eagles corner Avonte Maddox to talk about his background, especially entering the NFL. We'll hit on that right now in this one-on-one. Well, joining us this week, Eagles cornerback Avonte Maddox. Avonte, thanks for joining us, man.
No problem.
All right, so let's talk about your background, your history. Obviously, you're playing cornerback this year. So far in the NFL, you've played outside corner, you've played nickel, you've played safety. How long have you been playing DB? Has it been like since your whole life when you first started playing football?
Yeah, I've been playing DB for my whole. Actually, I played a little bit of linebacker in Little League, but other than that, once I got into high school, I've been playing DB.
What was that transition like when they said, all right, we're going to put you out in space. We're going to have you play some DB?
It wasn't too hard because I was already like fluent, fast. I always had good hips, recognizing plays and things like that. So it wasn't too bad.
Did you play other sports growing up?
Oh, yeah. I played baseball and basketball, but I played baseball first. That was my first love, I played that for a while before I started football.
Is there one aspect of playing corner that you feel has, best been impacted by either baseball or basketball? Like, was it playing man-to-man defense? Was it, tracking the ball, playing baseball? What were some of those things that carried over?
Definitely. I'd say two things. On the defensive side, when you're playing baseball, definitely with tracking the ball. It's not easy tracking that fly ball in baseball, and, I kind of do it in football. It's up there. You got to be able to track it. Also, with like moving lateral, when you're still in bases, you got to go either still to second or you got to get back to first because they're throwing at you. So it's kind of reacting like left and right, and that definitely help you out in football at corner because you press and you got to react left and right.
What did you play in baseball?
I played shortstop.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you played, were you like a big double play guy? Did you have a lot of range? Or what was your skill set when you played shortstop?
I had a lot of range. I had a good arm too. So, I think ball can be close to third base, and it gets through him, and I'm coming to grab it, and I'm throwing him out. But I turned up plenty of double plays, definitely when I was younger. Other than that, I played a little center field. Okay. So I could track tracking the ball. That was definitely a big thing.
One thing, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. If you could go back to being a kid, like being a little kid, whether it was Little League baseball, playing basketball, football, is there like what sport would you go back and say, like, man, if I could just play like one practice, which of those sports would you play?
I would play baseball.
Yeah?
I definitely for sure would.
I 100% agree. What was your favorite part of baseball practice?
Just the startup, warming up, throwing, playing catch, seeing how far you can throw the ball, getting your arm ready. And then after that, my second favorite part would probably be batting practice. I'd be trying to hit the ball over the fence all the time. It might not go all the way over the fence, but I'd be trying. Other than that, then you just fielding. You're working on plays, double plays, situational baseball, when the ball hits the right field, cutoffs, things like that. And then you have a little short scrimmage at practice. So you do kind of like a 3-on-3 type deal, and that was a fun part back then playing baseball.
You talked about the being able to track the ball and play the ball in the air. You've been a productive player going back to your days through Pitt. Is that something do you feel is coachable for defensive backs, or do you feel like guys just kind of have a knack for always kind of being around the football and being able to finish at the catch point, whether it's for an interception or for a pass breakup?
Yeah, I feel like it's hard to kind of coach that. I feel like it's you got to have ball skills. And, it's something, like I said, I've been working on it since I was yay high. And, I was always like, when the ball, tracking the ball, in baseball or football. So it just kept picking on and on and on. And then as I got older, I just always had a nag for it, when the ball is in the air. But, if you haven't worked on ball skills as much, it's kind of a little bit hard. It's challenging. Ball skills is very challenging. When you just playing him and then turn around playing the blur of the ball, it's very challenging.
And then the last question for you, you talk about when you first come into the league, and I mentioned you played all three of those spots your rookie year. Some guys, they need a little bit of time to just kind of develop. What was it for you that allowed you to kind of come in and be ready to kind of wear all those different hats as a rookie?
My mind was open when I got here. They told me I would be a nickel here. And, you know, when I got in here, I learned a nickel spot. And as I learned a nickel spot, I was just taking little key points out of where the safeties would be or where the corners would be here, just in case something happened like that. You know, when that opportunity came upon, you know, they asked me to do it, and I was hands-on ready, you know, willing to learn. Definitely, plus I have great veterans in the back end to help me out as well. Got to give them props. But, you know, other than that, you know, just willing to take on that opportunity and, you know, try to produce as much as I can to help us win.
Was there one guy that in particular that kind of helped take you under his wing? I feel like everybody's got that one guy that really helped them early on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all them guys, to be honest. But, you know, when I first got in, I played in the nickel, and then, you know, all the guys was helping me then. But then once I moved back to safety, it was a little bit different because that'd be my first time playing safety. And, you know, Malcolm, I sat right next to Malcolm in the locker room, and he used to help me every day. I used to ask him questions 24/7. So I definitely give some to Malcolm. And then, you know, Rodney was definitely a huge help because he was hurt at that moment. So all he could do is just, you know, coach me up. So I definitely give him definitely big props on, you know, helping me out in the safety end.
Avonte, this has been great, man. Great to catch up with you. Thanks so much for joining us here on our one-on-one.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much to Avonte Maddox and all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcast offerings here at Eagles Entertainment. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you next week.